guys, this is Miraj Aslam and I'm here with yet another past paper video. This time it's from 2020, the October-November session. We're gonna do your Igcse Economics 0455, paper 1, variant 2. You guys must have been through instructions. There are 30 questions and we have to finish them in 45 minutes. Let's get them done as quickly as possible. Let's look at the very first question, guys. What causes economic agents to make choices? So for those of you who are not aware, your economic agents are your consumers, the governments, and the businesses. There are three economic agents, right? And all these three economic agents are faced with the problem of economic scarcity, with the basic economic problem of scarcity, which means there are limited resources and unlimited needs and wants. So needs and wants are unlimited, so this cannot be the correct option. The existence of finite resources, that's the correct option because resources are limited. Needs and wants are unlimited. So this is the problem that is faced by all these three economic agents. Let's move on to the next question. Which combination of a factor of production and its factor income is correct? Well, for each factor of production, there is factor income. For capital, there is interest. This is correct. For enterprise, there is profit. This is correct as well. For labor, there are dividends. No, because for labor, there are wages. The factor production, labor, the factor income is wages. So C is not correct. Moving on to the next question, guys. For your question number 3, they've asked you about PPC. The diagram shows a production velocity curve for a country. The country moved from position X to position Y on the PPC, moving from X to Y, which means that there is less of an investment in capital goods and more expenditure on consumer goods. So what is the most likely reason for this change? Firms have decided to increase investment in technology. Well, that couldn't be true because if there would have been investment in technology, there would have been more spent on capital goods rather than consumer goods. So A cannot be correct. New economic resources have been discovered in the country. This would have caused a shift, not a movement along the PPC. So this is also wrong. The government has brought an increase in living standards. Well, that's correct because if the government brings about an increase in the living standards, what happens is that there's more sort of expenditure on consumer goods. People consume more. So C is the correct option, guys. Moving on to the next question. What is an example of a macroeconomic aim? You need to know that there are four main macroeconomic objectives, which are low and stable inflation, low unemployment, and increase in GDP, economic growth, and the fourth one was the balance of payments, right? So we are going to select the first one here because it says to create and maintain full employment. Well, that could have been the objective of that could have been defined as one of the major macroeconomic aims as well, just like having low unemployment is an objective, having to create full employment and to maintain full employment is similarly an objective for most governments. Okay, why might a market economy fail to achieve the best use of scarce resources? Why might a market economy? You need to know that there are three major economic systems: mixed market, free market, and the planned economic systems. So we need to understand that in a free market economic system, there are certain problems which cause a failure of this system. So a failure means they fail to achieve the best use of scarce resources, right? So consumers may lack information about which good to buy. So there is, you can say, information failure. You call it information failure, okay? So A is the correct option here. Although in a free market economic system, the resources are allocated effectively and efficiently to the right towards the production of right goods and services, But what if the consumers don't know about those goods and services? What if consumers do not have the perfect information? So there's imperfect information which causes market failure here, right? Demerit goods are always overconsumed. Remember that. So that's not the correct option. Public goods do not exist in the free market economic system. Most resources are owned by the government. No, no resources are owned by the government in the market economic system. All of them are privately owned. Moving on to our next question. The diagram shows the global market for copper with an equilibrium point X. So here at X is your equilibrium point. Which point represents the new equilibrium after the copper producer's cost increase and there is rapid economic growth? So you need to understand that there are two things happening here. The cost of copper producers is rising. So when the cost increases, when the production cost increases, it causes the shift in the supply curve towards left. So there's a left word shift on your supply curve. And if there's a rapid global economic growth, this would increase the demand for copper, and this would cause your demand curve to shift towards right. So with your demand curve shifting towards right and your supply curve shifting towards left, you're going to reach at a point at the new equilibrium point, which stands at A. So option A will be the correct option over here. Moving on to the next question, guys. The diagram shows the supply curve for a good. What is the price elastic supply when the price rises from $10 to $12? So when the price rises from $10 to $12, that is a 20% increase. What is the price elastic supply? That means how has your quantity supplied increased in response to an increase in the prices by 20%? The quantity supplied has increased by 40%. So 40% divided by 20% is equals to 2. So for question number 7, you're going to select option D, which is 2. Your PES is 2. 40% divided by 20%. These are the changes in supply and the changes in prices. A percentage change in quantity supply and percent change in price, right? This is the formula to calculate price elasticity of supply. All right, which task is not a function of a trade union? Agreeing the minimum number to be employed on a particular job. Do you think that's the task of a trade union? This is a knowledge-based question. So the trade union has a duty towards its members, and they negotiate on behalf of them with the management, right? So agreeing on something as to a number of people to be, or number of employees to be assigned to a particular job could be within the roles of trade union members or the representatives, trade union representatives, all right? Deciding on the level of a national minimum wage. Well, this is clearly not what trade union um, is about. This is not the function of trade union. This is what the government determines. It's a policy of the government, right, as to what should be the national minimum wage. Moving on to the next question. What does not have an effect on wages in a free market economy? What does not have an effect on wages? Danger level in the workplace. Yes, the more dangerous the work is, the higher the wages tend to be. This is obvious because the workers are going to demand higher rewards for higher risks. Government regulations. Yeah, in a free market economy, the wages are determined based on the demand and supply. How many people are willing to supply their services for a particular job, and what's the demand of them um, for the job, to fulfill the job, right? So government regulations is something that has got no link whatsoever in determining the wages in a free market economy. If the government regulations are such as your national minimum wage, then this does not tend to be free market economy anymore. Then your this becomes an intervention on part of the government, and the market does not freely function, because when the markets are functioning freely, it's purely based on demand and supply. All right. Moving on to the next question, your question number 10. The table shows how household spending changes with income. So income is increasing per month and spending is increasing as well. So we have to kind of find out what is the lowest level of income at which savings are positive. Lowest level of income at which savings are positive. So you're going to see here that your spending is more than your incomes, the savings are negative. Here again, the savings are negative. Here you're like, let's say minus 150. Here you're minus 75. Here you are plus 100. You get it? So, and all the other incomes are above 3,600. So 3,600 is the lowest level of income at which your savings are positive. Makes sense, everyone? Let's move on to the next question. What can a central bank increase in order to reduce consumer borrowing? What can a central bank increase in order to reduce consumer borrowing? The central bank wants the consumers to borrow less. What are they going to do? They're going to increase commercial bank deposits. Well, central bank has nothing to do with commercial bank deposits. They're going to increase government spending. Is that what they're going to do? Central bank does not actually take a decision on the government spending, right? Um, and the government spending more or less does not affect in any way whatsoever as to how much is the consumer going to borrow. The exchange rate. If the exchange rate increases, then the consumers might be borrowing more, spending more on inputs, right? And would the consumer reduce their borrowing if the exchange rate rises? I don't think there's any relation directly whatsoever, right? Only thing that we can assume is that the input prices go down, which actually allows the consumer to spend more. Perhaps that could be the reason. Exchange rate appreciates how the consumer would be borrowing. But again, there's no such um, strong reason as to whether the consumers would reduce their borrowing if the exchange rate were to increase. And the rate of interest. First and foremost, you need to understand that this is a central bank, and central bank can influence the rate of interest more than anything else. It can directly control the rate of interest, and if it increases the rate of interest, people are going to borrow less. This is such a simple question. This is something that we study all the time when we're talking about the monetary policies. The central bank increased the interest rate, and actually people end up borrowing less because the cost of borrowing increases, and when it decreases the interest rate, people end up borrowing more, right? So we've studied that like 100 times when we're covering the syllabus. The table shows the output and total cost of a firm. The output, here's your output, here are your total costs. So what is the average fixed cost of producing 10,000 units? Average fixed cost is your fixed cost divided by your output. So fixed cost here is 50,000 and output here is 10,000. 50,000 divided 10,000 is going to be $5. How do I get that it's 50,000? Well, when the output is zero, as in this case here, the fixed cost always will be there, no matter what your level of output is. So even when the output is zero, there is going to be fixed cost, which is 50,000. All the other costs are variable. So let's say for 1,000 units, 50,000 your fixed cost, and the other 50,000 of your $100,000 cost is your variable cost. Right. So the answer here, fixed cost divided by the number of units that are produced, which is going to give us the average fixed cost. The formula for average fixed cost is fixed cost divided by the total output. Fixed cost 50,000, total output 10,000. 50,000 divided by 10,000 is equals to $5. I hope that's clear, everyone. Moving on to the next question. A firm has fixed costs of $10,000. The table shows the variable cost at different levels of output. So what are the variable costs? If the goods are sold for $5 each, how much will be made from the sale of 4 units? So if a firm has a fixed cost, this is simple. If you guys study accounting, this could nothing be more simple than this question. The fixed cost is 1,000. The variable cost for 4 units is 350. So the total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. That is 1,350, right? And the sales from 4 units is 500 times 4, that's 2000. So 2000 minus 1350 is equals to, it should be 650, I believe so. 650. Alright guys, moving on to the next question. Firm X supplies bricks and decides to merge with firm Y that also supplies bricks. Which one of merger has taken place? Well, this is a horizontal merger, because in a horizontal merger, the firms are in the same sector of business activity, right? They're not in different sectors, in the same sector of business activity. There could be previously competitors of one another, and now they're merging their business. That's a horizontal integration. Who owns the public sector organization? The government. Everybody knows that. Come on. This is something that I'm not even going to bother discussing with you all. What are the two aims that the government normally pursues when managing the performance of the whole economy? To encourage an increase in production and prevent high inflation. For question number 16, A is your increase in GDP, to encourage an increase in production and to prevent high inflation. Low and stable inflation is one of your economic objectives. The other economic objective is to increase GDP. To increase production means to increase GDP, right? And low unemployment. And what else was your objective? Balance of payments. Remember, these are the four main macroeconomic objectives that the government has, right? So for question number 16, the answer is A. We're not going to look at the other options. We're going to save time, move ahead, because it's a very simple question. What is most likely to be the responsibility of a central government? The provision of immigration officials at an airport. The provision of security cameras shopping. The provision of security at the bank. The provision of ticket spectators on a train. So this is a very unusual question. You need to understand what the options are here. The provision of security cameras in shopping center is a responsibility of the shopping center itself. It's not a necessity. Without this, the country wouldn't stop functioning. The provision of security staff at a bank would be provided by the bank itself. The banks are commercial banks are held by private individuals in most circumstances, right? And they're responsible for its security. It's their own money. It's not the government's money. It's not the people's money. The provision of ticket inspectors on a train. The train does not necessarily need to be operated by the government. It could be operated by a private company as well. So again, here it's not a responsibility of the central government, or it could be the train could be actually run by your provincial government, your regional government. The central government is the government that is in charge of the affairs that affect the entire country. So the airport is a point of entry and exit to the country itself. So the immigration officials that are provided at an airport are provided on behest of the central government. All right, that answer is option A. This could have been a little bit of confusing for some people because it's something that's not necessarily covered in your syllabus. But if you, you know, if you have some understanding of what the central government is and what the regional governments are, you'd be able to easily get over this question. The table shows the tax that an individual would pay at different levels of disposable income. Disposable income is income that you have after deducting your taxes, right? The income that is left out after you have paid your taxes. Or the income that you have left to spend. The table shows the tax an individual would pay at different levels of disposable income. So if your disposable income is 10,000, you're paying no tax at all. That means if you're not paying no tax at all and your income is 10,000. If your income is 22,000, you're paying 2,000. If your income is 34,000, you're paying 4,000. If your income is 46,000, you're paying 6,000. Disposable income is them that is left over after paying the taxes. I don't know why they have given the cushion in such a manner that they've given you disposable income and then they've given you the taxes that you would be paying. But what you need to understand here is, regardless of what or how the cushion has been framed, you need to understand that the rate of tax is increasing. 2 divided by 20, 10%. 4 divided by 30 is more than 10%, right? 4 divided by 30 is like 13%, and 6 divided by 40 is like 15%. Even if you were to do 2 divided by 22, that would be 9%, and 4 divided by 34, that would be 11%, and 6 divided by 46, that would be 13. So you can say that the rate of tax, remember that whenever we are determining what kind of tax it is, we have to always look onto the rates, the percentages, right? The rate of tax is rising as the income rises, so that's going to be progressive tax. Question number 18, the answer would be option C. Moving on to the next question, guys. The government wants to reduce the consumption of cigarettes. Which policy would be most likely to do this? Increasing the subsidy? Well, subsidy encourages consumption, not discourages it and causes it to reduce. Increasing income tax? Income tax will actually reduce disposable income and not necessarily the expenditure on cigarettes itself. Increasing interest rate interest rate increases actually discourage borrowings and they discourage spending, but not particularly on cigarettes. Increasing the indirect tax on cigarettes, yes, when there's an indirect tax, there's a value-added tax, there's a sale tax on cigarettes, people are going to be directly forced to consume less of these cigarettes as it's going to be more expensive now. So this policy would likely be most effective and used by the government. Question 19. Which group should not be included in the measurement of unemployment? Redundant unskilled workers seeking alternative work. So you can say that there are skilled employees and there are unskilled employees, but if they are looking for work actively and they cannot find it, then they are counted for in the in the calculations of unemployment in a country. Seasonal agricultural workers in out of season periods. You can say that if these seasonal workers cannot find any other work despite actively seeking it, then they would be accounted for in the calculations of your unemployment, the measurement of your unemployment. Students over 18 years continuing with full-time education. The students are not necessarily actively seeking work, right? They're not part of the labor force, right? Labor market. So they wouldn't be included in the measurement of unemployment, although they're working age. Remember that being in a working age does not directly qualify you to be a part of the labor force, right, or the labor markets, because you are not seeking employment. If you're seeking employment actively and you're not able to find it, then that is what would be included in the measurement of unemployment, right? Those who have left the school and cannot get a job. So yes, this is clearly a definition of unemployment, right? Um, all right, let's look at this question. Just hold on, I just left the mark over here. I need to raise it. Yeah. The table shows the rates of unemployment and the real GDP growth for an economy in 2014 and 2018. So the rate of unemployment was 3% and the rate of real GDP growth was 4% in 2018. In 2018, the rate of unemployment was 10%. That means the unemployment has increased and the economy has actually, you could say, not necessarily slowed down, perhaps gone into recession. If there's a negative growth for 2 consecutive periods, then I think we'd account it for. We would call it a recession, right? The table shows the rates of unemployment, real GDP growth for an economy in 2014. Which combination of policy measures would be most effective in returning the economy to the 2014 level of economic activity? So we need to actually boost the economy. We need to ensure that there's economic growth, right? As it were in 2014. A decrease in direct tax and increase in the rate of interest. Well, increasing rate of interest is not good, because with increasing rate of interest, people are not going to be able to borrow more. They're going to spend less. They will be willing to save more, right? And when people save more, of course, with lower spending, there's low aggregate demand, and hence low economic growth. Decrease in direct taxes is good, but the other options is not the right thing to do to be able to expand the economy. A decrease in the government expenditure and increase in the rate of interest. Again, they're saying there should be an increase in the rate, which is not correct. An increase in the direct taxes and decrease in rate of interest. An increase in direct taxes, again, is not a good thing to do, because with higher taxes, people would have low disposable income, so they're not going to be able to spend more. So this is also not the correct option. D, an increase in government expenditure and decrease in rate of interest. Yes, with more government expenditure, the aggregate demand is going to increase, is going to shift to its right, causing an economic expansion. And with low rates of interest, people would be willing to borrow more and spend more, thereby increasing the consumer expenditure and hence causing the economic growth. An economy is experiencing rising prices. That is also inflation. That's also called inflation. Which government policy will help reduce consumer expenditure? Introducing compulsory saving for income earners. Let's look at other options as well. Investing more in building infrastructure. Issuing more banknotes and coins. This is not the correct option for sure, because with more banks on notes and coins that are being issued, there will be increase in expenditure, not reduction in expenditure. Reducing indirect taxes. Again, if there's a reduction in indirect taxes, the consumers are going to spend more, right? Investing more in building infrastructure, what has it got to do with where the consumer is spending their money and how the consumer is spending their money? This is not going to influence the consumers. So the only option that seems that makes sense here is that introducing compulsory saving for income earners. Although I haven't heard about this, but this is going to reduce the consumer expenditure if they're forced, if it's made compulsory on them to save their income, right? Well, this does happen in insurance contributions and national insurance contributions. There are such schemes on part of the government which deduct the incomes directly, some of the incomes directly, and puts them into savings, which are paid them out later on when after they retire. So yeah, there are these kind of policies um, um, in some developed economies, not everywhere, of course. So, but this can be an effective way to reduce the consumer expenditure. But rather, the objective or the motive here is to encourage savings and ensure the security of the pupils throughout their old age as well. So the option A would only be the right choice here. Alright, moving on to the next question. Some goods take a greater percentage of a typical household's total spending than others. Yes, that's true. So in consumer price index, we use the consumer price index to calculate inflation. The goods that take a greater percentage of spending are applied more weightage, right? So the correct option here is by giving a weight to the goods. So the option would be B for your question number 23. If you don't know what CPI is, how the weightages are applied, then you need to have an in-depth discussion on this topic, which cannot be done in this brief video. Alright, in countries with absolute poverty, low incomes can start a process that keeps incomes low. So countries with absolute poverty and low incomes can start a process. Okay, what are the stages of this process? Low incomes, low consumption, low prices, low output, low incomes. Let me look at the options here. It's true that with low income there will be low consumption and low prices, low output, low incomes, but this is not what keeps the incomes low actually. Low incomes, low government spending, high taxation. this is not making sense at all. The first one is still has some um, uh, you know, reasoning behind the link here, but part B does not make any sense at all, because it's a choice, it's a policy of the government whether they want to increase the tax or not. They would in fact be willing to use an expansionary policy and reduce the taxation, increase the spending when there are low incomes, or you can say when there is low economic growth. Low incomes, low investments, high profits, low dividends, low incomes. Low incomes, low investment. High profits. How can there be high profits when there are low investments? Low incomes, low saving. Low incomes, low saving. Right, if your income is low, obviously most of it will be spent in consumption. Okay, this is also something that actually, you know, I think it's something referred to as poverty trap. You spend most of your income in maintaining the basic necessities, or towards consuming the basic things that you need to survive, rather than saving. You rather have nothing to save, right? So low incomes, low savings, low investment. If you don't have any savings at all, you're not going to be able to make any investments. With no investments, the productivity is going to be low, and you continue to stay poor, or you continue to have low incomes. Right? Option D is the one that makes perfect sense here. Basically, when you have low incomes, why this link fails is that when you have low incomes, you are only restricted to consuming the bare necessities. So you don't have a choice over there that we are consuming less. In fact, you're saving less with low incomes. You have to consume what you have to consume to survive. So with low incomes, you're consuming what you need to survive, and you're not being able to save. So that's why we say low incomes, low savings, low investments, low productivity, low incomes. Right? So D would be the correct option here. This is the process that keeps the incomes low. Moving on to the next question, guys. The video is just getting a little bit longer, so I'm going to try and finish quickly. Which factor in the world's low-income countries limits their economic development? Which factor in the world's low-income countries balance of payment surpluses? No, if you have balance of payment surpluses, your economic growth wouldn't be restricted or limited, or economic development would be limited. High saving ratios. There are no high saving ratios in low-income countries. Large inflows of foreign investment. This is also not true. Rapid population growth, 25. This option makes sense. In most poor countries, low income, there's very high population growth, and it's difficult to sustain the entire population at the incomes or at the current national output. The table shows the percentage employment in the primary, secondary, and service sectors in 4 countries. Which country is likely to be the most developed? So the country which has got the greatest service sector is the one that's likely to be the most developed. You have to remember that always. So the correct answer would be A. Okay, question number 27. What causes the birth rates to fall in a country? Fewer women to work? No, this is going to cause the birth rate to rise, because more women will be then seeking to raise families if they're not going to work, right? And infant mortality rates rise. Well, with infant mortality rates rising, birth rates fallen. There's no such direct link between the two. These are two very different, um, you can say, economic indicators. Medical supplies and healthcare improve. Well, yes. If your medical supplies and your healthcare is improving, you can say that the birth rate falls in a country. How would you justify that? Well, In order to justify that, you need to remember there are more women that live longer, right? The women live more, right? And the fertility is low. Do you understand? So there are less children that are born per woman, as previously was the case. Do you understand? So that's the good explanation as to why we would go with option C, right? The optimum population increases. The optimum population has got nothing to do with this question here. So we're gonna move on to the next question. A country wishes to increase a current account surplus on the balance of payments. A country wishes to increase the current surplus. Which action will it take? Abolish an import quota. This is not going to increase the current account surplus because import quota actually reduces the imports. Increasing import tariffs, yes, this could be the right option. Remove export subsidies, no. Topic tax export producers, no. You need to encourage more export and you need to try and limit the imports coming to the country so as to get into the current account surplus. So increase import tariffs, yes. But again, there is a problem. That, I mean, there could be retaliation on part of the other economies as well, but this is not what we're going to talk about here. Here we're going to just choose the best option that we have. The table shows the country's exports and imports. Export of goods 200 million, imports 90 million, export services, import service. Okay, what is the country's balance of trade in goods and services? It's simple. You just need to add the export of goods and services. That is 235, and you need to deduct the import. That would be 190 and 228 million. 230 minus 228 million is equals to, like, let's say, I think 7 million. It's going to be a surplus because you're exporting more than what you're importing. So it's going to be a surplus of $7 million. That's your question number 29. Moving on to the next question, question number 30. The diagram shows the value of the country's exports and imports of goods over 5 years. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Between which 2 years did the country have an increase in the value of imports and improvement in its balance of trade and goods? So you understand that this is export of goods in the white region, and the gray region is your import of goods, right? So between which 2 years the country have an increase in the value of imports. So there's an increase in the value of imports throughout up until the year 4. So year 5 cannot be the option here. And an improvement in its balance of trade in goods. So how would you determine that? Well, you can say that there has not been quite an improvement between year 1 and year 2 in your balance of trade, because you see this region here is not this region here is bigger. The difference here is big. Let's say it's about 5 million surplus. This is less than 5 million surplus. So from year 1 to year 2 you can say that the balance is worsening. Year 2 to year 3, again the balance has worsened because this region here is less than this region here. That means the surplus is low. Surplus is reducing, or you know, um, narrowing down. So year 2 and year 3 couldn't be the correct option as well. Between year 3 and year 4 you can see that there's an increase in the surplus. There's an increase in the surplus. The difference increases between the exports and imports. There's an increase in your balance of trade surplus, or surplus in the trade and goods. At the same time, there's an increase in the value of imports as well, because imports are also rising. Imports are actually represented by these gray bars. So the gray bar is actually grown bigger. So the value of imports has increased, and there's an improvement in its balance of trade and goods. So the answer is from year 3 to year 4. Option C is the correct option. Yeah. So we're done. We're done with this paper. I hope this was helpful. The video has continued for 40 minutes. You're still left with 5 minutes extra. So yeah, I think it's possible for you to complete the entire paper within the time limit, and You have sufficient time. I think it's more than enough. Just don't get stuck on any one question and waste a lot of time. Do not get stuck on one question. If you think that you're not sure about the answer, just mark out the question, move ahead, finish the whole paper, then come back and try to, you know, try to identify the right option and do that within a certain time period. Like, let's say if you've got 2 or 3 questions that you're confused in, do not end up wasting all your time in just one question. Equally allocate the remainder time into these questions in which you have doubts, and then focus on each of these for their allotted time and come up with the answer. If you cannot come up with the answer, just make the choice and good luck. But the more important advice to you all would be to keep doing as many past papers as you can. Keep watching our videos. You can subscribe to us. If you need to practice for paper 2, you can join our live sessions. You still have got time, about 1 month until your exams. And with practice, you're going to improve. And you need to believe that it's a possibility. It's a possibility to get 30 out of 30 in your MCQs. If you're too good at it, if you've done a lot of practice, it's quite certain that you end up getting 30 out of 30. Hardly 1 mark would be lost, hardly, because of lack of focus. But all your concepts would be cleared if you keep on doing past papers and keep on watching our videos, right? So good luck, everybody. Keep watching the videos and give a thumbs up if you like them. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Assalamu alaikum.